So we made it last week, I think, to verse 35.
Yes.
So, I'm just going to read the title headings up to here and kind of just backtrack just a little bit so you can remember what we talked about. It says, beware hypocrisy. You remember the people were on top of each other. And then Jesus told them to beware of covetousness. And then he told us to not worry or be fearful. And he kind of gave us an illustration about the birds, how they're not worrying, how they're not, planting crops and putting up crops. They kind of just live out in the wild, and they're happy and they happy-go-lucky. And he says to look at the field of grass, how it's covered in flowers, how beautiful it is. And he told us not to worry about what we're going to be wearing, not to be, stressing out about things that, the stress can't make us live any longer or grow any taller. It says, the exact opposite is true. It'll make you shorter and you'll worry yourself to death. It'll shorten your life. We figured that out. And I threw out that statistic. It's like 8% of the things that you worry about are legitimate worries. The rest of the stuff is just you're wasting your time. You're hurting yourself. So it ends with talking about putting up your treasures in heaven where the moths can't eat it up and a thief can't steal it and all that. So we're going to pick up on 35 and we're going to see where it goes. It says, let your loins be girded about and your lights burning, and ye yourselves let unto men that wait for their Lord when he will return from the wedding, that when he cometh and knocketh, they may open unto him immediately. Okay, let me explain this to you. This don't make sense to us, but back then they used to wear these big old long robes, and they would have a belt around to hold it all together. And it says anytime you see this be girded, that means they're ready to work. What they'll do is they'll reach down between their legs and from the back pull their big long draped over dress, however you want to call it, and they'll pull it up and tuck it in their belt, and it kind of looks like pantaloons. That way you can raise up your legs and you could work. You're ready. You could do work. You could take off running. You could climb up something. I've never really worn a dress before, but I would imagine that it kind of is a little cumbersome. You can't really lift your legs up real high. So that's the idea. Be ready to go and to keep your lights burning. That means, in this instance, it means don't turn off the light and be asleep. Be up and be aware. Be awake. And right here it says, wait for the Lord when he will return from the wedding. It says to be ready. And Jesus is coming at a time we don't know. He's coming. We're supposed to be ready for his return at any minute. And he's just saying, if you're not got your light on and you're not, paying attention, it's going to be hard to let him in when he gets there because you're going to be asleep. You're not going to realize what's going on. And it says to be ready, so that way when he knocks immediately, you can let him in. And I think we can go back and kind of put this together a little bit. Let me keep reading because I'm kind of jumping ahead. So, blessed are those servants whom the Lord, when he cometh, shall find watching. Verily, I say unto you, that he shall gird himself and make them to sit down to meat, and will come forth and serve them. Now, he's talking about the second coming of Jesus, okay? If we're waiting to be raptured out of here, if we're waiting on Christ to come back, or we're going to be steadily waiting. We're not going to be, if you're waiting on him to come back at any minute, that means that you're not going to be doing some of the earthly things that you would normally be doing. If you just thought that Jesus was going to be here when we left here, if you thought he was going to be here, you'd be clearing stuff out of your phone, asking your neighbor to throw away the magazines that are in your closet. I mean, you know what I'm saying. You would be living a straight and narrow life if you are actually waiting on him to be here every single day. You know, wake up every morning saying, you know what, Jesus may come back today. And there's a lot of people that teach, if you've ever watched on TV that one channel, the Shepherd's Network or whatever it is. I used to watch him all the time, but he teaches that the people that teach rapture are wrong. That when he comes back, that's going to be the Antichrist, and he's going to be tricking you. And the people that are teaching rapture are really going to end up in hell. And you got to watch out for folks, because that don't really line up with what the Bible teaches. You know, the word rapture ain't in here, but it says, you know, you don't know when he's coming, but he's not going to leave you here to be going through tribulation. You know, some people teach that you got to go through so many years of tribulation before he comes back, and you know, no, the Bible, if you look at it, you're going to see so many times in here where he calls his children back. You remember it says that one's going to be working in the field and one's going to be taken away, and you know, that's what he's going to do. He's going to take us out. 38. And if he shall come in a second watch, or come in a third watch, and find them so, blessed are those servants. Okay, so he's saying right here, when he comes back and you let him in and you've been up waiting on him, it's going to, I think of the Last Supper, you know, when Jesus comes in and Peter, he asked Peter, you know, let me wash your feet. He become the servant to them like a slave. You know, that's what the slaves did. Washes the feet. The servants that, you know, at the door washed the people's feet before dinner and helped them get ready, put oil on their head, anointed them with oil, or, you know, whatever you want to call it. But Jesus said that to Peter and said, hey, let me wash your feet. And he said, no. And then Jesus said, well, if you don't let me wash your feet, I can't remember exactly how he said it. You know, in other words, you ain't going to belong to me. And he goes, well, wash my whole body, you know. And he got a little overzealous, and he's like, you don't need to wash your whole body. You just need to wash your feet. Your feet's been in the world. They need to be clean. So remember that when Christ comes back, and he comes in and we've been waiting on him, and he says, you know, I'm going to serve you. And it means literally to, you know, sit you down and feed you, to be your servant, to put food in front of you, keep you, you know, wash your feet. You know, don't be like Peter. You know, be humble and say, hey, okay, thank you. I guess, you know, that's be hard for me to do. And it says this second watch, or come in the third watch, or find them, blessed are those servants, the ones that were up waiting is what it's talking about. But these watches at night, if you were watching for something, they would be set up in fours. It would be from 6 to 3 to 12 back to 6. It would be in 4 different quarters. So he's saying, if even in the middle of the night, if you're up waiting on that servant, you're going to be blessed when he comes. Blessed are those that are waiting. 39. And this know, that if the good man of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not have suffered his house to be broken through. Again, has anybody ever had their house broken into and all their stuff stole, or, you know, does that happen to you? Yeah. If you would have known when he was going to be there, what would you have done? You would have had the police there, or you'd have been waiting there, you know, with a shotgun or something. But like I'm saying, he's saying right here, you know, there's a thief and he's coming, and you need to be waiting. And he's not saying a thief's coming. He's saying Jesus is coming, like a thief in the night, just like that. It says a twinkling in an eye in one of the other one. That's an atmos. That's like the fastest of the fastest. It's the movement of an atom. That's crazy fast. So,
like 1,000.
Yes.
I heard somebody say.
Probably Daryl.
No, it wasn't Daryl. Somebody else.
It's fast. So a twinkling of an eye, he can come back. So, you know, we got to be, and like I said before, if you're waiting on him and you know that he's coming back any day, it's going to help you through this walk, especially if you have struggles like me. If you struggle about stuff and you can say, well, Jesus could come back at any moment, you know, If you knew that he was coming to your house at lunchtime, would you have beer in the fridge? I mean, for real. That's what I'm saying.
I heard that song today. You ever heard it? It's something, I can't remember the name, but it was about if Jesus came to spend the day with you.
Oh, yeah.
Would you have to change some things around, or would you have to wait before you let him in? It's about that very subject.
Yeah. That's something to be mindful from, and this is the headline: be watchful. You know, we got to be watching, waiting for him. We just talked about the guy, breaking into the house. Would you, if you knew he was coming, your house wouldn't have been broken into, in other words. 40. Be ye therefore ready also, for the Son of Man cometh in an hour when ye think not. So when people start writing these books and doing all this stuff, the Lord's coming back on this day. I know exactly when he's coming back. Let me tell you when he's coming back. When you least expect it, okay?
I was gonna say when he gets ready.
When he gets ready, but it's going to be when you least expect it. That's when he's coming back. You can go back to the book of Daniel and figure out how many days it's going to be from the time from a certain thing or event, but why waste your time? Be ready every day. That way you're not slipping. And then we'll see Peter, asking the questions that we all ask. I love Peter. 41, then Peter said unto him, Lord, speakest thou this parable to us, or even to all? Peter opens his mouth and he goes, are you talking to just us, or are you talking to everybody? And Jesus answers him, and the Lord said, who then is that faithful or wise steward, whom his Lord shall make ruler over his household, to give them their portions of meat in due season? Well, he just answered it right there. Who then is the faithful and wise steward? Let me tell you, the stewardship. A steward is somebody that takes care of something that don't belong to them. If you've got a kid, you are a steward. If you've got, we're stewards of things that God gives us in this life, our bodies. We have to be good stewards to our bodies. The stewardship is something that's a big deal to Jesus. And he says, we want you to take care of the things that you have, and the things that you have don't belong to you, they belong to me. In other words, you need to take care of those things. And he's talking about anybody that's a good steward is the one that's going to be getting into heaven, and that's who he's talking to. Anybody that's a steward, which is everybody that's a Christian or saved. His portion of meat in due season. That means that you're going to get certain things. When you do good deeds and you do it in a good heart, you won't hear that, you worker of iniquity, I never knew you. You'll say, good job, good and faithful servant, and you get there's different levels of, stuff that goes on in heaven. You can get in by the skin of your teeth, or you can get in and have many crowns. I don't remember how many crowns it was. We talked about it earlier this year in Sunday school, or maybe it was last year. Daryl talked about the levels of crowns, all the different crowns. So that's what he's talking about, your portion. Where was I at just now? Okay, 43. Blessed is the servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find doing so. Taking care of the things that God's given you. If you're taking care of that, you're going to be blessed. Of a truth I say unto you, that he will make him ruler over all that he hath. But and if that servant say in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to beat the men servants or the maidens, and to eat and to drink and to become drunken, the Lord of that servant will come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour when he is not aware, and will cut him in sunder, and will appoint him his portion with the unbelievers. So let's backtrack and talk about this. So if you're being a good steward of things that you have, that whether it's a servant or a wife or a child or whatever, you'll be blessed. When the Lord cometh back, you're going to be blessed. But to the ones that are not good stewards and are saying, and this is how the people live. If you don't live with it in your heart that the Lord's coming back, you're going to live in the world and not necessarily beat your, slaves or whatever they are and beat your wife, or that's what he's talking about. You may be eating, glutton's one of the biggest things, eating and drinking and being drunk. You'll be doing that kind of stuff. You'll be living in the world if you're not expecting Christ to come. And that's just the way that it is. And you know what? He's going to cut him asunder and he will be appointed his portion. And it even says with the unbelievers. So that scares me because I can't even explain that. Because I'm taught once saved, always saved. And that kind of scares me. I don't know. I've heard people say that you can't never be taken out of God's hand, but you can take yourself out of God's hand. So I don't know. Who knows? I don't know. I can't preach one way or the other. We preach once saved, always saved, and I kind of hold firm to that. But I've heard so many things, and I've read so many things that don't really line up with that. But that's Calvinist. That's the guy that came up with the once saved, always saved thing. So, I don't know, but this is definitely a warning, and it's a parable. You got to remember, a parable is a story. And most of the time, parables were even make-believe stories. There wasn't real things that happened. So you can't base doctrine off of a story that Jesus was trying to make a point. He's just telling us to be watchful, to be waiting on the Lord. This is supposed to scare us, and it scares the good Jesus out of me. So, carry on. 47, and the servant which knew his Lord will, and prepare not himself. Let me read that again. And that servant which knew his Lord's will, there you go, and prepared not himself, neither did according to his will, shall be beaten with many stripes. So what does that tell me? If you know God's will and you're not living according to God's will, he's going to whoop you. And I feel it all the time. And you say you get to reading and you get this drive to want to be a teacher, to want to get up in front of people and want to teach. But then you read somewhere in James where it says, the teachers and the preachers are going to be held more accountable. There's going to be a different level that they're going to have to stand before, and it's fixing to explain it. The more you're given, the more you're accountable for. And that we even talked about it a few weeks ago. It says, it was talking about Sodom and Gomorrah was going to be in less trouble than the people that had seen Jesus. We talked about it the other week. I can't remember exactly all the stuff, but the whole thing about it is, if you've been to church and you know what God's will is, how you're supposed to do, and you're not doing it, it says you're going to be beaten with many stripes. That don't mean you're not saved still, and it don't mean you're not going to get into heaven. You're going to get a whooping. That scares me. And that would be, any good father to whoop their child when they're not doing what they're supposed to be. It says, spare the rod, spoil the child. So, you wonder why we go through the stuff that we go through. It's because he loves us. It ain't because that he just wants to make us miserable. 48, but he that knew not and did commit these things worthy of stripes shall be beaten with few stripes, for unto whomsoever much is given, of him shall be much required, and to whom men have committed much, of him they will ask the more. So that tells me if like my brother, God help him, I love him to death, but I told him when I first seen him after I'd been in church for a while, he goes, man, you must be really messing up. You're at church a lot, I'm like, you have no concept, Spanky. I'm like, no, I just like going. Okay. He has no concept, and he's going to be one of those people that God's going to go easy on because he's just so ignorant to what's going on. I would hope that I hope that he has a little bit of mercy on him. So, and it's terrible. I don't know. It's like talking to that brick wall over there. And again, I say it again. It says, whomsoever much is given, of him much shall be required. So if he gives you knowledge of what you're reading and you're not using that knowledge, you don't apply it, or if you don't share it, who's to say that he's going to keep giving it to you? I know when I used to study and I had no outlet, I would stay up all night preaching and talking to myself. I couldn't sleep. And now I have an outlet and it helps. I still do that, but it helps a lot. And the more that I empty myself, I could feel like the more I get back, I can understand more. I could do better. I can usually come right off the hip. When we start reading something, it won't make no sense, but I can hear somebody else read it and kind of reread it. And I'm like, you know what? I can tell you everything that's going on right here without having to really, I used to not be able to do that. I would be as lost as the next person and be like in La La Land, like, well, I had no idea. So, and I also look at this as, I went a long time saying if there was a God, if this, I didn't believe in God, and I think that's why I have such a drive, is because I denied him for so many years. I know that to whom much is given, there was a lot of forgiveness given to me, y'all. I used to cuss him all the time. I know there's a lot of forgiveness given to me, and I want to make up for it because I want to make up for it. I feel like that's what I need to do, and I think I have a testimony through it. So I read them, and it steps on my toes, and I have flip-flops on, so I don't like it. And it says right here, and to whom men have committed much, of him they will ask more. The more you do, the more he's going to ask you to do. Okay? All right. So we're going to move on to 49. It says division instead of peace. And I can relate to this. The way I can relate to this. It seems like, God come here or Jesus came here to make peace, and, everybody's going to be holding hands and hugging, but, that's not the case. 49, I am come to send fire on the earth. And will I, if it be already kindled? What he's saying here is, I come to send fire on the earth, and will I? He's saying, I read it in a different translation.
What will I?
And what will I?
You're leaving the water out when you say.
And what will I if it already be kindled?
Is that better?
I wish it were already.
That's what it is right there. He's saying that he's wishing that it was already kindled. So what does that say? He come to save the lost. He come to save the lost, but he says way back in this book, he says, I'm going to thresh the cleansing floor and separate the chaff from the wheat. And when the wheat and the chaff is separated, what he does with the chaff or whatever it is, he burns it. You're either for God or against God. There is no fence post to straddle. And he's saying, I come to send fire to burn this place. And he says, I wish it was already burning, is what he's saying. And he's talking about, well, I'll keep reading that way we can put it. But I have a baptism to be baptized with. And he's talking about his hanging on the cross. You remember he says, he says to his little crew, he goes, I've got, I'm trying to remember exactly how it's worded. He goes, I got a baptism to go through. Are you willing to go through the baptism with me? And they were like, yeah, not knowing that he meant crucifixion. So that's what he's talking about, to be crucified. And how am I straitened till it be accomplished? Jesus is saying right here, he goes, I come to separate the good from the bad, and I wish it was already separated, because now I have to go through this baptism to actually make it happen, to make this accomplished, is what he's saying. When he saves people, he went to hell, brought back the people and saved the people that were in Abraham's bosom, and they were dead people walking the streets. And he was wishing that all this stuff had already happened so he wouldn't have to do it. He said, he prayed to, if there's any way to let this cup pass from me. And it don't make any sense to me that he talks about sending fire, but that's what he's talking about. He's talking about, putting the devil to rest. Anybody that's following the devil, he's saying he's wished this already came, and that he didn't have to go through this. And he talks about his second coming. 51, suppose ye that I come to give peace on earth, I tell you, nay, but rather division. For from henceforth there shall be 5 in one house, divided 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. The father shall be divided against the son against the father, the mother against the daughter, and the daughter against the mother, and the mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law. We know that one's true, right? And the daughter-in-law against her mother, the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. So if you live in a family that is totally just going straight to hell, y'all all live like hell, and you get saved, and when you go home, they're like, what is wrong with you? You done joined a cult, you done did this. You know what, y'all, you're crazy talking. And that's what Jesus is talking about. He's not talking about actually, I guess he is talking about actual division. There's a lot of friends that I don't really talk to anymore because I come to church and they think that I'm a weirdo. And that's the division he's talking about. It gets real awkward when you're around friends that you are around, or when you're around family that are not saved, and you start talking about God and Jesus and stuff, and they're looking at you like you got the plague or you're a part of a cult or something. That's the division that he's talking about. And he's saying, I wish that all this stuff had already come to pass so the division wouldn't have never happened. He says, I wish wish this would be already accomplished. But just to backtrack a minute, it says the person that says that he's not coming in his heart, if you go back to 1st or 2nd Peter, it says he is long suffering that nobody shall perish. That's why he's not come back already. He don't want nobody to perish that is supposed to be saved. He wants everybody to have a chance to be saved, and that's what gives a lot of people comfort. There's a lot of stuff that you go through, and you say, why ain't he come back yet? And then you read that he's long suffering. That means he's got a long tempered is what it is. Long tempered is what it means, actually, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on this earth that it's going to be burned up. So when you have that division in your life and you go to church and you're divided against somebody at home and that don't go to church, just know that Jesus said that that's the way it's going to be. Just accept it. All right. Discerning the times. That's our next heading, 54. And he said also to the people, when you see a cloud rise up out of the west, straightway you say, there cometh a shower, and so it is. So, when you see the cloud rise coming out of the west, that was the sea of, I forget what the sea's name is now, I knew it. But anyway, when you see the clouds coming and the wind coming, you can say, hey, it's fixing to rain. And these were crop growing people, so they're looking for rain pretty regular. So when they see this stuff coming, they know to look at the earth and what the signs of the earth are gonna bring is the point he's making. You can look at the stuff going around you and know what's fixing to happen. 55, and when you see the south wind blow, you say there will be heat. And it come to pass. And the south down below them was a big desert, and when it starts blowing from there, that desert heat's coming. It's going to get dry and hot. So he's saying you can look at signs of the earth, earthly signs, and know what's going on. 56, ye hypocrites, ye can discern the face of the sky and of the earth, but how is it that ye do not discern this time? And what he's talking about here is Jesus being here, and the whole point why Jesus is here and who he is and the things that he's doing. All this stuff was prophesied. You could see the signs of the earth, but you can't see the signs that your books have been telling you the whole time, is what he's saying, you hypocrites.
It's like they can see that the time is coming when he comes back, but they just don't.
Yeah. So that's what he means by that. You can discern what's going on the earth, and you're looking forward to the rain when you see the wind blowing, but you see me healing the blind folks and raising dead folks and, getting rid of leprosy, which hadn't happened in hundreds of years before that, and you don't see the signs. You don't understand the signs. You're not discerning this time at this point. You don't understand what's going on. 57, yeah, and why even of yourself judge ye not what is right? He's saying you can't even judge what's going on rightfully. You ought to already have rightfully judged what is going on, is what he's saying. 58, when thou goest with thine adversary to the magistrate, as thou art in the way, give diligence that thou mayest be delivered from him, lest he hale thee at the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and the officer cast into prison. So he's talking about an actual judgment between two people. Say if me and Robert get into an argument, and he says, you know what, I'm suing you, we're going to court. I'm going to go to Robert and say, Robert, what can I do to make it right? I'm sorry, because I want to be able to make it right. I want to repent for whatever I did to you. And that's his point. He's saying, you see what's going on. You need to be repenting. You need to realize what's going on while you can, because you're fixing to be thrown into prison. So when me and him go to court and I hadn't went to him and fixed it, when the judge shows up, I'm going to be thrown into prison. And look at the last. 59, and it says, I tell thee, thou shalt not depart thence till thou hast paid the very last mite. Now, if you're in prison, how in the world are you going to pay everything back that you've done? That's the point. You can't. There ain't nobody there to pay for it for you. You got to do it while you're alive here, because when the judgment comes, when you stand in front of God at the judgment, if you're not bought by the blood, if you hadn't repented and you hadn't said, Jesus, I belong to you, you belong to me, I want you in my heart, you're going to be thrown into prison and you're going to have to pay everything back. How are you going to pay everything back if you're in prison? It's the whole point of the parable. That everything that's been said for the whole last chapter has went down to this point. Watch out for, hypocrisy. Watch out for the different things. Be mindful. I'm coming. Be waiting on me, because if you're waiting on me, that means you're living a righteous life. You're not just living out in the world. And when you're waiting on me and you're doing what you're supposed to, I'm going to reward you. You're going to be blessed. I'm going to be your servant. He's trying to hype us up and get us saying, Jesus is coming back every single day, because if you're not waiting on him, you're going to be beating your men servants. And that means you're going to be living out in the world, drinking, hitting your wife and cussing. And I remember before I used to come to church, me and her would get mad and I'd break the gear shifter off of the truck, or punch the radio, or punch a wall, or, do something stupid. That's the way it is if you're lost. You're going to act a fool. If Jesus come back and I was raging a fit and punching a wall, what is he going to say to me? When he comes back, it's too late. I'll be thrown into prison, waiting to pay back everything that I owe, sitting in a hole, not being able to work to pay for it. Does that make sense?
So is the prison referring to hell?
Yeah, the prison is hell, by the way. Do y'all want to keep going? We got 10 minutes here. Y'all want to talk about it? Anybody want to talk about it? Talk about it. Keep going. It does start a whole new thing, but I'm ready if y'all are ready. We got 10 minutes. We'll cover it and we might backtrack. It says, repent or perish, is what mine starts out with, chapter 13. There were present at the season some that told him of the Galileans, whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. And Jesus answering said unto them, suppose ye that the Galileans were sinners above all the Galileans because they suffered such things? Now this is hard to explain, but Pilate was the one that judged Jesus, and he was not necessarily known for a good guy. But Pilate, and I heard one of the commentaries talk about Pilate, and I've heard Pilate before. He was robbing from the people to build this thing called an aqueduct, and it's still there. And that had to have caused a lot of strife, and he's saying that maybe that this was during this time. But, Pilate would go in there and mingle the blood of the sacrifices with the blood. Let's just read it again. The present in that season, some that told him of the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. He's talking about the Galileans' blood mingled with the sacrifices. So it wasn't pure blood. And he's saying, are you sinners above all the Galileans because they suffered such things? The Galileans were part of the backwater redneck people. They were all, the Jewish Jews down in Judea thought that they were just dumb redneck hicks pretty much. And they thought when anything bad happened or anything like that happened, that it was because they were sinners. That's why it happened. You kind of got to read on to be able to put everything into context. I tell you, nay, but except ye repent, ye shall all likewise perish. Or those 18 upon whom the tower of Siloam fell and slew them all, think ye that they were sinners above all men that dwelt in Jerusalem? And Jesus did. This is a political question. It's hard to understand. But he's saying, Pilate mingled up the blood of y'all's sacrifices from the Galileans. And he thought, the Judean Jews, the guys that brought this up, thought it was because they were sinners. And Jesus just come back and said, the people at the Tower of Siloam fell. Do you think all the people that were killed in Jerusalem were sinners because the tower fell? It's what he's contrasting here. And he's trying to make the point, just because somebody died or something bad happened don't mean that they're sinners. It ain't God's fault that that he went in there and mingled up the blood. It wasn't God's fault that the wall fell and killed all the sinners. Stuff happens. It says the rain shines on the just and the unjust, and the sun shines on the just and the unjust. So he's trying to make the point, it ain't because they were sinners above all the reason that they died. It's just the way it is. And he was trying to get him into a debate or try to set him up, I think, here. He says, I tell you, nay, but except ye repent, ye shall all likewise perish. And he's talking about going to hell right there, spiritually perish. Repent, we all know what that means. He spake also this parable, a certain man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came and sought fruit thereupon and found none. So he starts out this parable saying that the man comes in and he goes to the fig tree and there ain't no figs on it. Then said he unto the dresser of his vineyard, Behold these 3 years I come a seeking fruit on this fig tree, and find none. Cut it down. Why cumbereth it the ground? He's saying, you know what? This tree's been here for 3 years. It ain't made no fruit. I want it cut down because it's just taking the nutrients out of the ground and starving the other trees. Get rid of it. And the guy answers, verse 8, and he answered and said unto him, Lord, let it alone this year also, till I shall dig about it and dung it. And if it bear fruit, well, and if not, then after that thou shalt cut it down. Now, does that make sense?
Yes.
He's saying, hey, you know what? Let's not cut it down just yet. Let me, break up the ground around it and fertilize it and then, see what it does next year. He's saying, don't be so judgmental. Don't just say, hey, let's just hew it down. And that's what we need to do. And we go to people and we see how they're living and we just want to just push them out. We don't, it's just get away from me kind of thing. Or, you're going to hell or something like that. When you really need to be digging around it and dunging it. And I know I feel like I've had a lot of that happen to me. Dug around and dung. So what I'm trying to say here is what he's telling them to say, don't be so judgmental on folks. You're saying that these people, all this stuff got mingled in the blood and they're a bunch of sinners is why it happened. But Jesus come back and said, hey, this thing fell down and killed all your people. You think they were sinners? And he just told this parable saying, don't be so judgmental. Repent for your thoughts or you're going to perish with the rest of them. Is the whole gist of that little story there. So I think we'll knock off there.